to our archives and request the recording. And please register for our next webinar, which is going to be 2 weeks from today, Thursday, November 4th, and it's called "Get Out of Line: Nurturing Adaptability in Design." It's another super cool topic, and I think it's going to be extremely relevant as well for people currently and moving forward. So as for Josh Bancic, Josh is an associate ergonomist with Human Scale Consulting and is a registered kinesiologist. Based in Waterloo, Ontario, Josh's consulting experience entails all aspects of ergonomic program development, including implementation of employee training and assessment programs. So welcome, Josh, and thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. And so I'll hand the floor to you today.
Excellent. Thanks, Danny. I'm just going to pull my slide deck up here now for everybody to see. And you're going to just confirm that for me, Danny.
It's coming up. There it is.
Okay, excellent. Thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. As Danny mentioned, my name is Josh Bancic and I'm an ergonomist with Human Scale Consulting. Some of you may have attended the webinar last month we did on designing healthy work environments, and I'm excited to be back today to speak with you on a slightly different topic, something, as Danny mentioned, is very relevant for all of us right now, and that is the future of ergonomics, but more specifically, how that's going to play a role as we move forward with hybrid work. I have spoken with dozens of clients over the last few months, and this topic keeps coming up. And we're not about 19 months now into the pandemic, and very few have made firm decisions on how they want to proceed. And I suspect part of that reason is the unknown. We still don't know exactly what work is going to look like. However, I think we're narrowing down our focus a little bit on hybrid in some form. It's going to be different depending on the type of work that is done and the organization's culture as a whole. But I do suspect that many employees may not be back in the office 5 days a week moving forward. Brief background on myself, as Danny highlighted as well. I'm a registered kinesiologist and spent many years working in a clinical environment, helping individuals recover from injuries, whereas now in my role as an ergonomist with Human Scale, I like to think as my job being more proactive in preventing some of these injuries from occurring. To set an agenda for the next 30 or 40 minutes, a few topics that I definitely want to cover and open up to discussion with you, starting with how work has changed. And what does this mean specifically for not only employees, but organizations as well? We were all sent scrambling back in March 2020, taking our laptops home. And many of us found ourselves working at a kitchen table on a laptop. Things have hopefully progressed and improved since then, but for many people, they haven't. And so there's a lot of considerations to look at, especially what that impact of poor ergonomics has had. Everybody's attention, and rightfully so, was on the risk and danger of the pandemic itself. However, 19 months later, we're seeing a huge influx of disability claims. MSDs are increasing. And people in general just aren't very comfortable. So addressing that as soon as we can and not waiting any longer is really a priority for many of the customers that I work with. Again, not knowing initially what we should have been doing, now's a time, especially closing out the year and starting fresh in 2022, to get some real solid policies and programs in place. And for that reason, I think it's important to start making some investment in ergonomic tools. And ergonomics often gets labeled as expensive, and that's why people tend to shy away from it. When in reality, if we have good policies and initiatives in place, yes, tools and equipment do cost money, but if we can provide our employees with some basic tools, which we'll discuss, that can greatly enhance their comfort. And finally, as I close off today, I'm going to give some case studies and some examples of some clients that I've worked with and how their programs have gotten off the ground. But for many of you, there may not be a program in place. And a lot of the times when I get on a call with a client, they'll say, I wish I could tell you otherwise, Josh, but we don't really have a program in place. And that's okay. They almost seem embarrassed to say it, but all of us are navigating this together. And whether you're starting small or looking to implement a full-blown program, there are definitely steps you can work up to get this working off the ground. And that's a discussion we can have not only at the end of today, but following the webinar, if you're looking to investigate this further. Okay. I always put this slide in my presentations because I think it's easy to lose focus on what we're talking about and what ergonomics is, right? This term gets used all of the time in marketing material for a variety of products. I mean, there are ergonomic dog toys that I've seen. There are ergonomic baby products. I have 2 young boys, and I think every piece of equipment and toy that we've purchased has ergonomics in there in some fashion. So to narrow our focus today on the office environment, ergonomics is the science of fitting the task to the worker. And we do this to maximize the productivity of our workers while reducing discomfort, fatigue, and injury. I think this was overlooked quite a bit over the last little while. And if we think about being able to fit the task to the worker, the work is very much the same for all of us if we're on the computer, right? It's a chair, it's a desk, it's a keyboard, mouse, and a monitor. But the positioning of those have a huge impact on how we feel at the end of the day, end of the week, and end of the month. The new normal is something that we've heard a lot of, right? Over the news every day, the new normal of how we're living our lives with COVID. But I think the next normal is where I want to focus our attention now. And some stats up on the screen right now, which are probably familiar to many of you. But the key focus here is on the fact that many employees, as I mentioned at the beginning, will continue to work at home indefinitely. And it's not to say it's 100% of their time, but when they are in the office, what are some considerations for that? And I've seen a few ideas kicked around as of recent, where organizations are maybe doing unassigned seating, where when you come into the office, you maybe don't have a dedicated workstation, but you would sit and work at an open desk. That also brings in other elements we need to consider, and that if a different person is sitting at a different desk each day, how do we ensure that they have the right equipment and adjustability for them to stay comfortable? Okay, so these new health and wellness issues that are emerging, not only at home, but also as we transition back into the office, do take a little bit of new thinking outside the box and bringing new ideas to the table of how we're going to solve for all of this. We'll start first by talking about work from home. And while this has been the commonplace for many of us, it's still going to be there for a lot of people moving forward. And it's really the ergonomic challenges that we face are no fault of our own. Typical workstations at home may consist, as I said, of a kitchen table, a wooden chair, possibly a bar height counter with a bar stool with absolutely no backrest. And those red lines you're seeing are not benefits of working this way. Those are the risk factors that we're encountering. And we'll discuss those in a little bit of detail today. But discomfort levels correlate directly to the risk of injury and overall work performance. I think any of us can agree that if we're uncomfortable, have a nagging pain or injury, that's taking some of our focus away from our work, right? And that is exacerbated if we need to be seeking, treatment for it. Physio, massage, those appointments also take away from our day. And so if we can improve just our overall posture by changing how we work and the tools that we're working with, that can hopefully mitigate those injuries and discomfort. Now, further to that, employees themselves are not likely to make informed decisions about their work tools on their own. And this really became evident at the beginning of the pandemic when I started getting emails and phone calls from family members, from friends of friends saying, you know, I've been working at home for 2 weeks and my back is killing me or my neck is killing me. And it's not something that we typically think about. We've almost taken for granted a lot of times the tools that we have available in the office, and being thrust into an environment with almost no adjustability really wreaked havoc on our bodies for a lot of us. Further to that, even if quality work tools could be installed, most employers do not have the reach or in-house expertise to ensure proper setup and utilization. And I highlight this because when people were sent home, some organizations took the mindset of let's give people some money or a stipend or a taxable benefit, however it was transferred, to make sure they got good equipment. Right? That presented a whole host of other challenges. People were overwhelmed with choice. They didn't know what to buy, where to buy it, what's good, what's bad. And even if they got it, they didn't really know how to adjust it, right? How high should my chair be? Where should my monitor be positioned? So tools were difficult to come by or non-existent. And even when tools were implemented, that training component was really lacking, and that can be improved significantly, in my opinion. So I've mentioned awkward postures a few times and talked about why working at home in these situations has been tough on the body. So I'm just going to bring up 2 slides here, really just to summarize from a biomechanics standpoint, what MSDs or postural risk factors are present. The laptop itself, as many of us have learned, is probably one of the worst things we can work on from an ergonomic standpoint. Yet it's been our only lifeline for many months in terms of connecting with our colleagues and peers. The main issue here being that when the screen and the keyboard are connected, inevitably something has to suffer. And the first thing to identify when working on a laptop is that we need to separate the two. This can be done by using an external monitor and your laptop keyboard, or potentially elevating your laptop and then typing on an external keyboard. But separating the keyboard from the screen is really key to start improving your posture. That leaning forward or trunk flexion, being drawn into the desk because of how the computer is situated, shoulder shrugging because of the height of the desk, which we'll talk about in more detail shortly, anchoring our forearms on the sharp edge of the table, soft tissue compression on the forearms and thighs, and then the feet unsupported depending on the height of your chair and desk. So this is kind of the main concerns that I'm seeing in a nutshell, and some really quick and easy strategies to improve these will be discussed today. This looks great, and it's definitely an improvement from the previous slide. However, as a long-term solution, I don't know the warranty or durability of a cardboard box under our feet, right? The friction of that, the moving, it's not going to stay in one spot. That rolled up towel behind our back, while providing temporary relief, probably isn't the best long-term solution. So these are things that, again, in a pinch, as a very short-term solution, can help people improve their comfort. Likely not things that you want to be using for 6 months, 12 months, 2 years down the road as you invest in yourself and your home setup. Okay, and this is probably one of the better images that I've seen doing virtual assessments for the last 19 months. I could probably write a book on the number of situations I've seen and just things that make you shake your head and wonder, why did you think that was a good idea to position things that way? Okay, so identifying the risks of home office work, the lack of adjustability, brings us to the next topic of why should we be investing in ergonomic tools. I highlighted this when I talked about the desk height, but this is a universal measurement of tables and desks, somewhere around the 29.5-inch mark. And it may fluctuate a little bit more, a little bit less, depending on the thickness of the tabletop itself. However, the real problem here, as you can see, is it correlates to the resting elbow height of a 6'4" male. This is going to fluctuate as well based on somebody's torso or leg length, the length of their upper arm. In general, though, you need to be about 6'3" or 6'4" to work with your feet on the floor and your elbow at the work surface. Because only 2% of the population is that tall, that's resulted in so many of us in the office before the pandemic, and more so now working at home, to realize how uncomfortable that becomes. Because really, we have no choice but to do one of two things: elevate our hands onto the desk or shrug our shoulders in order to reach that keyboard. So this is really the crux of the problem. It's where everybody should start and focus on, is being able to elevate themselves in their chair so that their elbow height matches the desk surface. And that can be done in a variety of ways: through an adjustable task chair, through an adjustable desk, or possibly an articulating keyboard platform that attaches underneath the desk. But however you're able to achieve this, that's the main focus and the main starting point that I emphasize with all of my clients when conducting assessments. I now want to go through some examples of 3 scenarios: a laptop scenario, a desktop scenario, and then we're going to discuss a sit-stand scenario. And I was trying to think of what to label these slides, and this is what I've come up with: is bad, better, and best. So hopefully this resonates with some of you. And starting on the left with bad, how many of us have been working. Better, in that slide I just showed you, using some household items that you may have lying around to improve your setup for the short term. But as a best case scenario, having some really great ergonomic tools, both in home and in the office, because we're going to be splitting our time there most likely, is going to yield the best results for our comfort. Okay. You'll notice, as I mentioned earlier, when it comes to a laptop, the first thing you got to do is separate the screen from the keyboard. And that's achieved here in the better and best scenarios, having an external keyboard. And on the right-hand side, that almost blocks your laptop keyboard from being used at all, with that protection in front of it. So there's no temptation to use that. The very same rules apply when it comes to the PC. The main difference here is your keyboard is already separated from your monitor, but being able to add a few more ergonomic tools, such as a proper footrest, articulating keyboard tray, height adjustable desk, and a monitor arm, it's really kind of the gold standard, giving you complete flexibility for your workstation at home. But I highlight this specifically for those in the office as well. If a workstation can be comprised of all of these elements, any employee that you have coming into the office is able to make some very quick adjustments in order to fit it to their stature. Because of the discomfort so many of us have experienced in sitting at home, standing became the next best option. And height adjustable desks have been more and more prevalent in the office over the last 5 or 10 years. And people at home got creative. And a few of the slides that I've pulled in here are things that you may also recognize. When people are uncomfortable sitting, they immediately turn to standing as a solution, when in reality, standing is no better than sitting. It's all about movement and changing our posture throughout the day. Standing can have some really powerful benefits if it's done correctly. However, in these 2 scenarios, the keyboard is likely the only piece of equipment at the correct height. The screen is still too low, the mouse is still too low. And so even though you're standing, you're still generating a whole host of risk factors that need to be corrected for. Okay. In this scenario here, they've at least separated their keyboard from the screen, so it's slightly better. Still not great, as the mouse is too low and causing additional risk factors there. So this all brings us back to the question of how much should we be standing? I probably get this question on a weekly basis. And there's a lot of misconceptions around it. A lot of people I work with or speak to during an assessment who have a height adjustable desk will say, "Oh, Josh, I stand all day." It almost becomes a point of pride. How long can you stand for? And in reality, this can actually generate new areas of discomfort. Discomfort in your feet, your legs, even low back pain can be generated from prolonged standing. This is a guideline that's come out and generated by Cornell University's Ergonomics department. And it's not going to happen perfectly. I'll be the first to admit that. I don't follow this perfectly myself, but it does give some perspective to individuals to think about, if I only need to be standing for 8 minutes or 10 minutes for every 30, 2/3 of my time is still sitting. The focus should first and foremost be on your seated posture, because that's where you're going to spend more of your time. Then allowing yourself to work in a standing position is powerful and beneficial. But understanding the ratio here gets people to rethink not only how much should they be standing, but how important their seated posture is. Okay. For those who don't have height adjustable desks, something I often mention to them is, set a timer on your phone, in your calendar, an event that comes up on repeat, just to get out of your chair. And standing up and moving, as simple as that sounds, is not something that everyone does on a regular basis, and it can have a huge impact on our comfort come the end of the day. And again, this is what that would look like in a best case scenario. The ability to not only stand, but stand in a neutral posture where your keyboard and mouse are at the correct height, your monitors are at the correct height, and then very easily you can transition back into a seated posture by lowering the desk to the seated height and sitting back into your chair. This is a lot of times where that anti-fatigue mat conversation comes into play, and employees would ask me, well, if I'm going to be standing, I should probably stand on an anti-fatigue mat. When in reality, if you're following that guideline, you may not in fact need one. In fact, sitting down in your chair is probably a better movement for you than trying to stand or power through that discomfort you're feeling from standing too long. So part of the larger conversation in terms of what equipment should be prioritized, but incorporating movement, I would say, is key. How we do that is going to be different for all of us depending on the resources at our disposal. Lighting has also become something of interest for many employees now working at home. And it was something that was actually coming across my desk quite often in the office, especially in newer offices where we may have switched to LED lights, and many employees found it to be too bright or the lighting was too harsh. And that has a very close correlation to things like eye strain and headaches. And so as we moved into our home environments, many people almost found it more comfortable because they had more autonomy and control over their individual light levels. I myself have actually turned all of my overhead lights off. I've got a task light on my desk here, but with some natural light and some ambient light through a lamp or a task light, that's typically sufficient for most computer work. And employees are really finding this beneficial because that eye strain they may have felt in the office has reduced because they have more control over their light levels. As we re-enter the office, this may be a topic of conversation, probably something to explore with different members of the team, possibly facilities, but incorporating some form of a dimmable lighting or just reducing your overhead lighting altogether, providing task lights to those that require additional lighting has been a really effective strategy as well. So to sum that up and just, focus on what we should be doing, especially with hybrid work becoming more prevalent, we want to make workstations aesthetically pleasing for many reasons. We want our offices to look great, but if we can incorporate that adjustability to it, it makes it a much more functional space. And whether it's a dedicated workstation for somebody who's there every day of the week or a shared workstation for multiple employees, it really achieves what we're looking for, and that is fitting the task to the worker. Now, when I was putting this webinar together and speaking with Danny, this conversation kind of led to, some people maybe don't want to open a can of worms. And I think Stephen mentioned this when we were getting set up here this afternoon. And that's okay. I think everyone is rightfully so a little bit hesitant to implement a program, not knowing how work is going to continue to evolve. But what I can say is for the clients that I've spoken with that have not done anything yet, that's only making the problem worse. So starting at a very basic level in increments of generic training, webinars, online self-assessment, whatever vehicle or mechanism makes sense, doing something right now is better than nothing, because with each passing day, employees who are left at home in the dark without resources are only going to continue to struggle. And I think we both know that employees left to their own devices and the internet are going to come up with some solutions that may not in fact be the best for them. So what I want to do now is just highlight an online cloud-based platform that we launched 3 years ago called ErgoIQ that has a number of components to it. And wherever you fall on this wide spectrum of work from home, all in the office, or somewhere in between with hybrid, it's a tool and a resource that has really proven effective for many of our customers as they navigate this new work environment. I'm not going to go into the details of all of this, but essentially there are different components that can fit your needs, starting on the left with a tool called ErgoIQ Home, which is a product recommendation tool. This is something that can narrow the focus of your employees, and rather than searching for 30 chairs or 1,000 chairs that the internet throws at them, it allows you to curate a specific product list, have them go through a series of questions, and then identify which products make sense for them. So this is something that has really worked well from a facility standpoint to make sure that people aren't going rogue and buying all kinds of things. It's a curated list that gives you the power to control the purchases. ErgoIQ Fit is a self-assessment tool that employees can take in any environment, and they can take it as many times as they want. This initially was launched to train a large number of employees in the office. It's translated quite well to the home work environment. And as we transfer back into the office, works even better, because if you're at a different workstation every day, it allows you to train yourself on that. And if you're at home certain days a week, you can train yourself on that environment as well. So a really great resource that employees can access on demand on their schedule. ErgoIQ Live is that in-person element. And when I say in-person, I mean virtually in-person, where if employees want to talk to a person in real life, they can schedule a 30-minute consultation, allowing them to bounce questions off myself or one of my colleagues, clarify things that they maybe are unsure of. And that way, they have peace of mind knowing that the changes they've made have been effective and they're not doing any further harm to themselves with the setup they have. ErgoIQ Learn is another aspect of this, which is offered a few different solutions, whether it's a live webinar, a recorded video, or possibly an e-learn module that we now offer, a more interactive training that's available for clients depending on the needs of their employee base. I'm going to share with you just a couple examples and case studies of how this can work. All of those components, while designed to work cohesively together, are in fact available a la carte. And many organizations have reviewed this, they've reviewed their needs, and they've decided what's going to work best for us. Policies have changed pre-COVID versus now. And this highlights here one organization and how they operated. Okay. Typically, they would have needed a doctor's note. They would then go through our ErgoIQ Fit self-assessment. If the outcome of that self-assessment was poor, they had the option to do a virtual assessment. If the outcome of that self-assessment was good, well, then you can take them off the list and they're in pretty good shape. That all leads to the equipment decision. And it's not to say that every employee is going to need equipment, but if we are looking at improving their setup for the long term, some form of stipend or equipment program is going to be needed, because whether you're at home or in the office, you are still going to be responsible for providing a safe work environment for employees. And that bridge is just getting crossed right now, as I mentioned, with this happening on the fly. Okay. Another example here, an organization taking a different approach. They started with more generic weekly training. So whether it's new hires or employees who wanted to attend a live webinar, that at least gets a lot of information out there. So if people just want to listen in, in the background while they're doing their work, it's still providing them with a resource. Following that, the self-assessment was available. We then had a consultation with one of our team members, and then the decision was made of whether equipment was required or not. Those home recorded videos are also really helpful if people want to post videos on their intranet homepage. That's a really great starting point where people can access these on demand. Everyone's schedules are very, very busy. So if they can't commit to a set time for a webinar, the next best thing is to click on that video when they have some time, and they can go through it on their own schedule as time permits. Okay. Last one here, again, similar scenario where they did a webinar to start, followed by some self-assessments and then a consultation with myself. All of this to say that there's necessarily a one-size-fits-all approach. I raise these examples and give you the platform of ErgoIQ as a resource, simply to say your needs, your organization's culture, how your employees work is going to be different. And that's a conversation that I'd love to have further with you. And if I can be a resource, not only with training or even just policy conversation to bounce some ideas off, it's very interesting to see how organizations differ in terms of their approaches, whether it's proactive, reactive, or somewhere in the middle. And it's also interesting for me to see how organizations, different parts of North America are operating. Working with some global clients, policies are different. Sometimes in Europe, they have different legislation that requires significant training, and that's going to differ by region. So suffice to say, all of your programs may look different. Really today, I wanted to highlight what some options may be for you, get that conversation started. And I think that in the long run, being proactive when it comes to ergonomics in your program is going to save your organization significant money and keep your employees a lot more comfortable and productive. So with that, I'm going to pause. I'm going to turn it back over to Danny. Are there any questions that have come through that you want to raise?
Yeah, there's been a couple of questions, and yeah, thanks so much, Josh. That's incredibly insightful and useful information. So one of the questions, you touched on it a little bit. It's about organization, they don't have a program in place right now. Where do we start, and how do we manage a budget with that? Like, again, the concept of opening a can of worms, but if there's some limited budget, where do you start and set proper expectations?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Danny. I think the good part of this is everything is scalable. And if budget is a concern, you can really, act as a gatekeeper. So if you're not going to give this training availability to everybody, maybe you limit it to people who are requesting help, right? If someone reaches out to HR, possibly saying, I need some assistance, maybe that person then goes through a self-assessment, or maybe they go book a consultation. So you do have some capabilities to limit how big you want this to be. And something I tell every client is, if you look at your total headcount, how many people are actually going to participate in something like this? And it's not for ergonomics. It's any initiative that you roll out, any wellness initiative or anything in general. Typically, what is your engagement and your participation rate? And that helps guide where you want to start with something like this, because we both know that, not every employee is going to want to go through a training or take a self-assessment. Some people just don't want that. So to answer that question simply, it's scalable, and we can have that conversation to figure out who you should be targeting first in terms of support.
Okay, great. I have one other question then that's come through as well, and then we'll open it up to others that want to ask live. Let's see here. So there's an organization that's looking at creating kind of a variety of workspaces within the work environment. So how do they consider ergonomics when you know, I'm just kind of now ad-libbing a little bit here, but when they have a space that might be working at some sofas, or space working at armchairs, and then space working at workstations? How do you manage ergonomics with a variety of work environments in a single space?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. I think you're right. I mean, offices in general have changed, right? There's a different look, there's a different feel to them. And when it comes to ergonomics, I think the best piece of advice is, you know, don't stay in one posture for too long. And working on a beanbag chair or on a sofa, you know, if that is your break or your change of posture, that's great. But at the end of the day, if you're engaged with technology, there are a few key things that you need to have at your fingertips. And a good task chair is one of them. A solid workstation with as much adjustability as possible, but making sure that you have a chair to sit in with a good backrest, being able to adjust your monitors to the correct height. I mean, those ergonomic principles don't change. And so while some offices have evolved to look a little different, more casual, have some lounge spaces, those are great for meeting with people, having conversations and collaborating. When it comes to, you know, that work you're doing with your technology on your computer, having a workstation with those key elements is crucial.
Okay, great. Who else has questions? Anybody else wants to ask Josh some questions? One thing that Josh has offered is to do a free consultation with those that are interested in booking kind of a one-on-one time. You know, those are for Chase clients or people that have attended the Chase webinar series. So please contact either Josh or myself or someone within Chase Office Interiors, and we can help arrange that for you and your organization.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, Danny, just looking at what your current program looks like is helpful and can maybe give you some direction as to where you want to go. And again, there's often sometimes people are embarrassed to say, Josh, we have no program. We don't have anything in place. And that's okay. I think a lot of people are in that boat. There's only positive directions to go from there. So we can discuss, you know, where you're at, where you want to get to, and what some strategies are to get there.
There's also a comment online around this is being recorded, and you're certainly welcome to share the recording. It's the recording will be on our Chase website within 72 hours, and so certainly welcome to share it out as you see fit to colleagues, etc. Just there's also another note here. I'm trying to read it as see if I can read it and share what the question might be here. So something about it's around the challenge around the budgets and prioritizing maybe people that have medical conditions and maybe doing a gradual rollout through the organization. See, any comments around that aspect in terms of medical, and then again gradual rollout, how to do that successfully? And I'll just keep reading the rest of it here as you're answering, Josh.
Yeah, I think I mean that would fall more along the lines of a reactive approach, right? I mean, if you're waiting to the point where people are, you know, developing MSDs and official diagnosis, we definitely need to pay attention to those and address them because actual injuries have occurred. I think the main messaging here is, well, those definitely need to be addressed. Preventing those from happening is actually going to be much more cost effective. And there's two elements to that. There's the training element and there's also the equipment element. And strategizing around, you know, what the budget is and how it should be allocated to each component is something that I'm happy to discuss with people individually on a one-on-one follow-up call.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Further to that comment was around, again, just trying to you know, manage that budget over a period of time as opposed to a one-time expense, and also tracking assets. You know, that's the other thing I guess would be a conversation, Josh, is you know, organizations that you start distributing assets through the organizations that that might be for the home office. It might be for the different work environments and stuff that within their space, and so proper tracking of those assets is obviously pretty critical too, I'd imagine.
For sure. And I mean, several clients have taken that approach where people could take equipment home all the way through to their chairs. So while it was a great initiative, it's going to be interesting, to your point, how that all gets tracked, how inventory is kept. If individuals leave an organization, how does that chair get returned to the office? Do they keep the chair? So these are all conversations and policies to make sure are buttoned up before you roll something out, because it can get messy when it comes to tracking those pieces of equipment. If things are getting loaned, if they're being owned by the employee, that needs to be very clear, I think.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, great questions, great comments. Any other questions or comments people would like to share, either on the chat or live?
Josh, is there any case studies where they quantify the increased productivity by enhancing people's work at home or even in the office when you provide them with better tools?
Yeah, it's a good question, Stephen. So in terms of productivity and discomfort, there's several studies that are available when it comes specifically to the work from home. Because it's so recent, there aren't a ton of studies showing that yet. I think those are still to come. But just anecdotally, I can say with employees that I've spoken with organizations that I've spoken with, they are now seeing an increase in claims, in discomfort from employees who maybe didn't raise their hand or complain earlier on in the pandemic. Because, I mean, let's be honest, we were happy to have jobs and continue working, but now that we're experiencing significant levels of discomfort, it's impacting our performance. Those need to be addressed. But I think across the board, those numbers are increasing and need to be addressed. And just further to that, I think employees, while working at home, have become more educated and aware of what they need. So as they do transition back, their expectations may have changed as well. They may have higher expectations of what a workstation should offer them, either because they've invested their own money into a really great home setup, or just understanding and doing some research around, what's required for them to stay comfortable.
Excellent. All right. Any other questions? Please don't be shy.
Well, I'm just really curious about noise, because I know a lot of people have complained working from home makes it really hard to control noise levels. I know that was not really discussed today, but I'm just curious, are there any tactics or strategies available for people to help with reducing distracting noise?
Yeah, I think I can speak firsthand to this one, having two boys that are 3 and 1, and the noise that they create. But I mean, earphones go a long way to canceling some of that noise out. But I think for that reason alone, that's going to be driving people back into the office, and having, days where you're in the office, maybe you have a bit more quiet to get certain things done. And then if you are, if you're on phone calls or you have other things to do on different days, maybe those are your work from home days. But not a perfect answer by any means. Definitely something that's been more difficult last year, with kids being home from school even, and trying to juggle all of that. I would say if you can at least find a dedicated space within the home to work, that's maybe somewhat quieter or dedicated to that type of work, earphones and those noise canceling headphones go a long way, and the technology is great on those these days.
Yeah, and along that lines actually as well, thanks for the question, John Paulo, because on November 18th, actually, we are hosting a CEU event on acoustics. And so it's going to be a great CEU event on Thursday, November 18th. So we haven't even actually posted it on our website yet, but that is to come, and it's a CEU accredited course. So Great. Any other questions or comments? All right, Josh. Well, again, thank you so much for your time and energy and wisdom. It's again, so much appreciated. And obviously it is a big topic. And as time continues to go on here, we're going to have more studies, more information, more real life case studies to be able to share out there as we continue to roll out in the hybrid work environments. So I just want to thank everybody for joining the Chase webinar series today. And thanks, Josh, again, and I really appreciate it. And so please, everybody, you're going to be receiving a request to fill out a 1-minute survey. It literally can take 15 seconds. So we'd love to have your time and just give us your feedback on the value of these webinars and other topics that you'd like us to go and find and bring to the community. I'd like to hear your feedback on that. And please remember to register for our next webinar, which is 2 weeks from today, November 4th, called Get Out of Line, Nurturing Adaptability in Design. And you can go to chaseoffice.ca/events to register for that. So other than that, we'll give everybody back some time here, which is fantastic. And thank you again, Josh. And please let us know if any of you would like a one-on-one consultation or question and answer time with Josh as a professional ergonomist. It's always a great use of time to ask professionals more about their expertise. So thank you very much, everyone. And thank you again, Josh.
Thanks, Danny.
Josh.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.